We have the Carney government looking at moving away from the zealous approach to climate change that we saw under Trudeau. And we've already seen some of this with some of the changes on EVs. At the same time, the same weekend, we have Canada and India have agreed to a series of steps to strengthen bilateral ties. And this comes 2 years, you'll recall. It was, I think, like it was a big deal in Canada, but I have a sense it had ripple effects in the Commonwealth, which is when we had a very big diplomatic row between Canada and India 2 years ago. For our listeners, just to get you quickly caught up, 2 years ago, there was a Canadian citizen in Surrey, where I live, that was killed. Trudeau government came out and effectively blamed the government of India for that assassination. This person was a person of interest to the Indian government because he is seen as a leader, or was seen as a leader, of the Khalistani movement. And so we pretty much went at diplomatic war 2 years ago. And now our foreign minister has met with the Prime Minister of India this weekend. They issued a 1,200-word statement that lays out a quote-unquote new roadmap to restore stability after these 2 years of rupture. So I find this interesting as well. One, because if Canada is going to diversify our trade relationships, I mean, it makes sense to really deepen our links with India because of the economy that it represents. But it's also interesting to me that these two stories coupled start to drive a story of contrast. I find the Carney government, at least Carney himself, is driving more and more contrast and separation between what the Liberal Party was under Trudeau versus what it is now.
Yeah, I mean, I think on the climate targets, I think that's just a global trend we're seeing, right? I mean, you've seen UK ministers doing the same thing of kind of easing away from some of this net zero zealotry. And, there's battles going on in government there between some who are still committed to some of that zealotry and others who are more interested in jobs and growth. And I think that's probably more a reflection of, I mean, the personality change certainly helps because Trudeau was so tied to the environmental stuff, right? That maybe it would have been impossible for him to have moved away from that. I think the reality of the situation, I suspect Carney would still be in that position if it wasn't for the fact that the Western economies are basically stagnating. And part of that stagnation is because of things and barriers we've put on ourselves, which don't exist in other parts of the world. And that's where I think you're seeing this pushback against some of it, right? And you've seen it all over the West. So that's maybe just a natural consequence of what's happening because people are realizing that actually, as noble as it may be to try and hit some of these climate targets, the consequence of that is fewer jobs and less economic growth for us at the moment. The great green tech growth that we were supposed to see, I mean, it's happened to a point, right? But it hasn't delivered, record economic growth. So I think this is just a natural consequence of what you're seeing in the rest of the world as well at the moment, rest of the Western world. So
do you think it's politically expedient in the UK, the changes that we're seeing in the language and some of the policy ideas that people are talking about? How much of this is economically expedient Canada-wise, and how much is politically expedient?
Well, yes, that's an interesting question. I mean, I think there have been, certainly on the right in Canada, there's been a feeling that if we're going to tackle the climate change issue, there are so many other markets for which we have to go do that. So why not export more LNG if it's going to get people off coal in some other markets? And our contribution to greenhouse gas emissions is minimal compared to other markets. So I don't know what this final strategy is going to look like, but if it is let's go take more sort of quote unquote dirty power off the grid over here by exporting cleaner Canadian energy abroad, and we're not, and we're willing to allow our LNG, our oil and gas to be part of that story, then I think that's a very practical, pragmatic approach to this, and notionally would have also the job creation boom for us as well.
I think directly to your point, Holly, I think it is probably mainly driven by the economics because Canada's had the weakest growth in the G7, and you've seen and it's so tied into the US economy where these things have just many of these mandates have just disappeared under Trump. So maybe from a competitive point of view, so I think it's more economic, but there is a political element to it as well, which is very much as Joseph said in his introduction, which is I think Carney genuinely does want to deal with this kind of Western alienation feeling.